I desire only to know the truth and to live as well as I can, and to the utmost of my power I exhort all other men to do the same. I exhort you also to take part in the great combat, which is the combat of life, and greater than any other earthly conflict. Plato tells us that his highest aim is to simply know the truth and to live as well as he can. But he doesn't stop there. He urges every one of us to join him in that same pursuit, to seek wisdom, to act with integrity, and to inspire others to do the same. He even calls life itself the greatest battle of all, a war more consequential than any clash of swords. In other words, our true struggle isn't against external forces, but within ourselves, mastering our desires, upholding justice, and letting the light of truth guide us forward.
The conqueror of the stars, General Radar. And the blade of Mikkel and Melania the Seventh. These two were the mightiest to remain, and locked horns in combat.
To lock horns in combat. It is no surprise then that tangled horns are wrought through the crucible. Find crucible feather talisman. Horns view the crucible as sacred for the refinement wrought through its evolutionary gifts, most prominently their tangled horns. The crucible is held as a holy force of transformation, for it refines life through adversity. But why tangled horns? Well, the answer lies in that phrase.
And locked horns in combat.
Tangled horns are the literal embodiment of locked horns. They are the tangling of horns in combat, a testament to adversity born from opposition. Their tangled horns stand as a living record of every struggle that forged their identity, refined them, and brought them strength. War of Rugalea, an incantation of what is jokingly called the Bear Communion, channels the power of Rugalea, the great red bear. An incantation that is more akin to the divine invocation of the Hornsent than it is to the Dragon Communion. Only through desperate battle with the feral wild can one discover a god unique to oneself. Only through desperate battle and more akin to divine invocation. In those few words, we come to understand that invoking the divine here isn't about prayer, it's about the embracing of raw conflict, the adversity of facing opposition. The crucible of combat itself becomes the altar and the invocation. For the warriors of the tower and their limb, combat isn't just survival, it is the highest form of worship. These warriors of the tower, bound to the crucible spiral, use battle itself as divine invocation. Horned warrior ashes. This heavily armored guardian spirit of the tower attained inhuman strength through divine invocation. In their world, divine invocation isn't a hushed prayer, but the raw intensity of battle itself. The very act of facing an equal opponent refines them, granting otherworldly power at the price of inner unrest. Both the Horned Warrior Helm and the Cursed Mask embody this same paradox. Horned Warrior Helm. Helm featuring a crown of sturdy tangled horns, allowing the wearer to invoke divinity. Attire of horned warriors, keepers of the tower. Divine invocation bolsters the strength of the wearer, but causes the blessing of the Erdtree to become nauseating, reducing the restorative effect of drinking from the flask of the sacred tears. Focus is also troubled by wearing this helm. And Cursed Mask. A mask affixed with a crown of tangled horns, worn by those who would invoke divinity. Divine invocation heightens the dexterity of the wearer, but causes the blessing to Erdtree to become nauseating, reducing the restorative effect of drinking from a flask of sacred tears. Focus is also troubled by wearing this mask. In these cases, the twisted horns channel the crucible spiral energy, granting supernatural strength or dexterity. Yet, they make the blessing of the Erdtree become nauseating and trouble the wearer's focus. This troubled focus signifies the inner turmoil summoned by divine invocation, by facing opposition, by hardship, by suffering, by simply living. The adversity of life stirs a storm within you. Both the Horn Warrior helm and the Curseblade mask make it clear that divine invocation is as much an emotional ordeal as it is a source of power. This shared warning of focus being troubled signals that facing adversity, fighting through tangled horns unleashes a storm of feelings like passion and rage that must be mastered just as rigorously as any physical trial. These strong emotions often manifest in the form of storms, as seen with the enraged divine beast. A charm depicting the crazed cavorting dance of the divine beast, conducted at the Tower Festival, raises potency of storms. Divine beasts are messengers of the heavens, and their rage mirrors the tumult of the skies, of which storms are the pinnacle. Here, storm potency stands in for emotional upheaval. Storms aren't calm rains, they're ferocious blizzards, raging storms, and howling winds unleashed. Invoking the divine isn't about weathering a storm, it's about the adversity that creates the storm, the raw surge of emotion that hardship summons. Storms are nature's rawest display of conflict, and our fiercest emotions, fear, fury, and exhilaration, are born in the clash of challenge and will. This isn't merely about boosting storm powers. The haunted summon the very emotional tempest sparked by adversity. In every trial, it's those certain feelings, our inner storms, that once mastered become the crucible of true strength. But why dance? Adversity alone can forge strength, but why would the haunted ritualize dance to heighten spirituality? Long before they ever stepped foot in battle, the lion dance was a core part of the haunted ritual. A graceful invocation of the divine, a celebration of their bond with the crucible's current. Only when the Impaler's army threatened their tower did they weaponize that very dance. Remembrance of the dancing lion. When the Impaler's army assailed the tower, the ritual of the lion dance was turned toward martial ends, its divinity, its fury, its light-footed beauty. This moment shows just how integral divine invocation was to haunted identity. The dance wasn't created for war, it was a part of who they were, an artistic ceremony that summoned spiritual strength. By sharpening those steps into battlefield maneuvers, the haunted demonstrated that invoking the divine isn't merely a tool for war, but the essence of their culture. Their very identity, art, ritual, and belief became a living weapon when the crucible demanded it. The haunted's lion dance grew out of two inseparable needs: to train the body in the rhythms of combat, and to sanctify each fight as a ritual of spiritual growth. In ancient Greece, Plato argued that true warriors must learn a war dance, the Pyrrhic, which was practiced across ancient Greece in places like Athens and Sparta. Laws by Plato. Wrestling is to be pursued as a military exercise, but the meaning of this and the nature of the art can only be explained when action is combined with words. Next follows dancing, which is of two kinds: imitative first, of the serious and beautiful, and secondly of the ludicrous and grotesque. The first kind may be further divided into the dance of war and the dance of peace. The former is called the Pyrrhic. In this, the movements of attack and defense are imitated in a direct and manly style, which indicates strength and sophisticacy of body and mind. Far from mere performance, each motion had a practical purpose: dodging the enemy's blows, thrusting at an opening, or regaining balance after a strike. The Pyrrhic taught coordination, timing, courage, and the mental discipline to remain placid under duress. In Plato's view, this melding of martial technique and moral education forged warriors whose bodies, minds, and soul moved in perfect harmony, not as a mere spectacle, but as essential moral and martial education. The Pyrrhic drill coordinated footwork, timing, and courage into its practitioners, teaching that movement and music can forge discipline of both body and soul. The haunted society functions as a timocratic order, a regime ruled by honor, the spirited part of the soul, just as the Golden Order embodies an aristocracy ruled by the reasoning part of the soul. In Plato's timocracy, the spirited part of the soul, courage, honor, and the love of recognition takes precedence, producing a warrior class society. The haunted make that concrete. They prioritize displays of valor, elevate martial excellence above all else, and mark status by their tangled horns, visible proof of past triumphs. Their assemblies, their rites, even leadership, are all organized around conflict. In their fusion of dance, combat, and governance, the Haunteds stand as a living democracy, where spirit and honor rule, and every tangling of horns is not only law, but sacred. For I suppose that you mean to exclude mere unit-structured courage, such as that of a wild beast or of a slave. This, in your opinion, is not the courage which the law ordains and ought to have another name. In this passage, Plato distinguishes true civic courage, courage that is directed toward protecting the lands and people, from simple instinctive bravery. He argues that the law-ordained virtue of courage must be guided by reason and training, not merely the raw, unreflective boldness of a beast or the desperate ferocity of slaves. By insisting that unit-structured courage deserves another name, he presents civic courage as a refined quality, one that combines bravery with wisdom. This isn't the kind of courage the Hornsent or the Golden Order revere either. It's not the wildness of the Cursed Blades, nor the unbridled lust for battle that once ruled Godfrey. What's praised instead is the rare warrior who brings their storm under command, who unites strength with self-control and ferocity with purpose. It's not just about facing adversity and strength, it's also about self-control, because these ascetics attempted to become tutelary deities, guardians bound to a location. A tire of the Tower ascetics embodying their commitment to an austere existence of strict self-control. In order to ascend from their mortal flesh into tutelary deities of the land, they heightened their spirituality through severe ascetic training. Here, the ascetic risk guards remind us that true guardianship demands more than raw power. To watch over a sacred site, to protect its people and uphold its rights, you must master the passion that hardship awakens. Only by pairing fell strength with rigorous self-control can one become more than a beast and take that crucial step toward becoming a guardian spirit. But they failed. Cursed Mirror. Cursed blades appear to dance when they spin their shimmering circular blades. These ascetics, who failed to become tutelary deities, were scourge to those who attempted to invade the Haunted's homeland. Long ago, before the land was overshadowed by invasion, this scourge was shunned, and the Cursed Blades were imprisoned. They mimicked the movement of birds, perching on high ledges and launching themselves into a sudden Titan-like charge. Yet, without feathers, wings, or true bond, their imitation rings hollow. These were once Tower ascetics, meant to master both strength and restraint. Their zeal went unchecked. They had no self-control, and they became monsters even to their own people. Their story warns that strength and devotion, untempered by discipline, can lead you astray rather than lift you higher. The Cursed Blades were shunned as failed ascetics, barred from their sacred rituals. They were still unleashed against the invaders. That contradiction speaks volumes. Conflict for the Hornsent is more than mere violence. It's a spiritual crucible, one they revere, but only when guided by purpose. When passion runs unchecked, even spiritual warfare becomes monstrous, and the very tools of transcendence turns into a scourge. But the path of tutelary ascension didn't always end in ruin. Some did master both conflict and control. Most notably, the first of them all, Ornis. Divine Bird Warrior Ornis. Spirit of the Divine Bird Warrior from who the Horn Warriors claim descent, clad in golden armor and granted wings and feathers by divine invocation. Ornis succeeded in taming the divine bird and made its wings his own as he soared through the sky. When he finally fell to the earth, he lived on as a guardian deity of the temple quarter. Ornis' triumph wasn't merely taming the divine bird, it was also the conquest of his own beastly instincts. In taming the divine bird, he disciplined the feral strength within himself, forging a bond of mutual respect rather than domination. Interestingly, his name Ornis most likely derives from the ancient Greek word ornith, meaning bird. A perfect linguistic mirror of his destiny as a divine warrior who not only tamed the divine bird, but himself too. When he finally fell to the earth, he lived on as a guardian deity of the temple quarter, This is what a tutelary deity is, a guardian of a location. His story makes crystal clear that true tutelary deities must both conquer the beast and commune with it, a perfect blend of raw power and self-control. From this microcosm of failure and triumph, beastly impulse tempered by self-control, we now turn to the macrocosm of Elden lordship, where the same tension shapes the fate of an entire realm. Godfrey Icon, a legendary talisman depicting Elden Lord Godfrey. Godfrey was a ferocious warrior. When he vowed to become Lord, he took the beast regent Sarosh upon his back to suppress his ceaseless lust for battle that raged within. Malka saw in Godfrey the same raw potential that shaped the Haunt's greatest warriors. By taking Sarosh, Godfrey turned unchecked ferocity into disciplined strength, exactly the self-control any guardian deity must master. Godfrey's icon illustrates the pinnacle of this teaching. As the same warning appears on an ordinary shield, Beast Crest Heater Shield. A medium-sized metal shield features a beast as its crest, serving to remind warriors not to succumb to the arousal of battle. Fight with passion, but become not its prisoner. Godfrey carried Sarosh to master his own ferocity. The Beast Crest Heater Shield gives us the same lesson in everyday gear. Whether you are bearing a living beast on your back or simply buckling on a shield, the message is the same. Embrace the passion of battle, but never let it consume you and hold you prisoner. Godfrey, he must master not just ferocity, but the unchanging stillness of being. This is the gift of the precious sap of the Erdtree, the Golden Order's offering of permanence, order, and eternity. While Sarosh and the Beast Crest Heater Shield teach restraint in the heat of battle, the sap embodies the immutable and eternal nature of the Erdtree. In drinking it, Godfrey isn't taming an inner beast, but choosing to stand unmoved by the crucible's ever-turning cycle, affirming his place as the first Elden Lord of the eternal and immutable Golden Order. Talisman of Lord's Bestowal. A talisman depicting Godfrey, first Elden Lord, receiving the precious sap. Increases poise after using a flask of tears. The Lord accepted the sap stoically, without any sign of wavering. No wonder Lord of the Erdtree casts a long shadow over the lands. For the Horn Scent, whose culture sanctifies the crucible's ever-turning cycle of growth and change, of evolution, the sap's unyielding stillness is anathema. They worship evolution, change, to become something greater. Each horn a living record of evolution earned through combat. Drinking the precious sap of the Erdtree forces them into eternal stasis, stripping away the becoming, the change and evolution that defines their spirituality. The result is nausea, an innate revulsion at a substance that starves them of the very change they revere. Only those who have truly mastered both the crucible of becoming and the Erdtree's being, a true Elden Lord like Godfrey, can drink its unchanging essence without flinching. Where a divine warrior like Ornis tames a divine bird and eventually becomes a guardian deity of the temple district, Godfrey likewise bears Sarosh, the beast regent, as a constant reminder to master his own ferocity, defending not a single shrine, but the entire realm. And so, the divine warriors stand as the microcosm, a concentrated image of a greater truth. They guard towers and shrines, refining themselves through ritual combat and spiritual discipline. In mastering their passions, they become more than warriors. They become guardian deities, vessels of strength and spirituality held in balance. On a grander scale, the Elden Lords are their macrocosmic reflection. Where the divine warriors protect a temple, the Elden Lord bears the burden of an entire realm. Where the warrior tames the beast within, the Lord must do the same, only with the weight of history, legacy, and the divine upon his shoulders. The crucible they both pass through is the same, only the scale differs. No wonder Lord of the Erdtree cast a long shadow over the lands. And among Elden Lords, no figure illustrates Ornis' journey more vividly than General Radahn. In our battle, we strike General Radahn down. His death releases his spirit into the heavens. Yet this fall is not final. Through the secret right scroll, his soul is drawn back to the earth, reborn into flesh to defend the lands and people once more as Elden Lord. Just like Ornis's ascent to the heavens and return to earth, only to live on as a guardian deity of the temple district. Their spiral of trial and triumph isn't just myth, it's a blueprint for our own journeys. To us, the Spirit Incantation offers the same lesson. The Spira is a normalized crucible current that one day will form a column that stretches to the gods. Here, the crucible current is our own struggle, every challenge we face, every battle we choose to fight. The gods stand not only for divine beings, but for what we hold most sacred, our convictions, our dreams, the causes worth defending. Just as Ornis rode the spiral skyward before grounding himself as a temple guardian, and Radahn's spirit soared before returning to fight anew, we too engage in our own personal crucible. When we channel our passions with purpose, when we tame our inner beast and master our impulses, we build our own column, a spiral of action and intention that stretches toward our highest ideals. In other words, if we're going to spiral, to fight, spiral so high that we pierce the heavens. Even if the crucible current threatens to drag us under, if it is our own gravest test we are spiraling through, we keep spiraling, break through, and we've already won. Our spiral will be the spiral that pierces the heavens. To invoke the divine, to summon the crucible current is to fight for what we believe in. Temper our strength with self-control. That is the true crucible of transformation. The path by which we ordinary souls forge ourselves into something enduring, guardians not just of shrines or realms, but of the values that define us. Dialectic may be further described as that science which defines and explains the essence or being of each nature, which distinguishes and abstracts the good, and is ready to do battle against all opponents in the cause of good. This quote casts debate as a kind of intellectual sparring. It's how we pin down what things really are, shine a light on what's truly good, and then square off against any idea that gets in the way, a contradiction, an opposite. Dialectic isn't just talking, it's a battle for truth. We've seen warriors refine themselves through combat, but if the crucible of battle tests body and strength, what then is the crucible of the mind? How do we test the mind? What weapons would we bring? Golden Arcs. Sorcery of the Inquisitors of the Tower, wielded as an incantation of the spiral. A swing of the arm releases a procession of golden arcs. The arcs resemble barbs, a known symbol of coercive questioning. It's no accident that they're called Inquisitors. The very title proclaims their purpose: to inquire, to probe, to test. Just as tangled horns are the embodiment of locking horns in combat, these barbed arcs embody barbed questions, critical remarks meant to question certainty and thrust you into aporia, to perplex the mind. Inquisitor Ashes. The Inquisitor hags wield barbed candlesticks. One of the Inquisitors casts a tower hex to heal HP, while the hex of the other boosts her own attack power. Inquisitions often perplex the minds of the uninitiated, and so seniority was viewed as an asset. Each barbed arc is a probing question, designed to sting and unsettle belief. What do you believe in? How strong is your faith? Will you fight for what you believe in? Will you die for what you believe in? At what point does the search for understanding become interrogation? The invocation of the divine wasn't fought with steel or storms, but with barbed questions. Their battle was the mind, where dialectic and debate became tools of refinement. In this crucible of ideas, in this test of faith, every question turns a spiral one step higher, forging conviction, increasing your faith, your understanding of what you believe in, through the very trials of doubt. When you find yourself in aporia, questioning your beliefs and stumbling in the dark, aim for the light. Let each question you ask illuminate the path to an abundance of understanding, to arrive at Euporia. Twin blades symbolize an abundance, the secret treasure of the tower. Though the blades fashioned from golden shoots, are largely wilted and darkened. Their luster can be restored by dealing damage to foes. However, damage dealt to those who live in death will have no such effect. The very name of this weapon tells us a lot about the Inquisitors. Euphoria is an abundance or ease of understanding. The act of inquisitions perplexed the minds, put one into a state of aporia. The goal was to reach the state of euphoria, of understanding, that journey being symbolized by the euphoria's very appearance, dark to light, doubt to understanding. Euphoria is more than a mere weapon. It is the embodied promise of the Inquisitor's method. Its blades, fashioned from golden shoots, lie wilted and darkened, yet each true strike against an opponent rekindles their luster. In this way, the twin blade mirrors the soul's journey from aporia into euphoria. By facing opposition, by wrestling with contradiction, insight is regained. Drawn on the imagery of golden shoots, euphoria suggests that its very origin, its roots, lie in untapped potential, a soul awaiting nourishment. Only through the combat of life, the crucible, can those shoots be fed, returning the lustrous gold. But upon using the skill, the lustrous gold fades. It returns to its original state, darkened, almost lifeless. This cycle reflects the nature of life itself. At first we begin in the dark and wilted, with our souls unshaped, just waiting to be tempered by experience. But this isn't just about being alive. It's not about the mere beat of our heart or the blood that runs through our veins. Truly living is about nourishing the soul, seeking understanding, and constantly striving to grow. This cycle of renewal, from darkened to golden and back again, mirrors Plato's view of the soul. Let us consider whether or not the soul of men exists in the next world after death. Thus, there is an ancient belief which we remember, that on leaving this world they exist there, and that they return hither and are born again from the dead. But if it be true that the living are born from the dead, our souls must exist in the other world, otherwise they could not be born again. In that other world, the soul basks in pure understanding, its golden shoot shining with divine insight. But rebirth means forgetting. The soul re-enters the world of senses with its memory dimmed, its understanding wilted. The reason why souls exhibit this exceeding eagerness to behold the plane of truth is that pasturage is found there, which is suited to the highest part of the soul, and the wing of which the soul soars is nourished with this. But when she, the soul, is unable to follow, and she fails to behold the truth, and through some ill hap sinks beneath the double load of forgetfulness and vice, and her wings fall from her, and she drops to the ground. The soul was once soaring on wings nourished by divine truth, but upon its embodiment, being reborn, it sinks beneath the double load of forgetfulness and vice. Its wings weakened, its memory of the forms of divine knowledge and understanding is lost. In other words, each rebirth strips the soul of that prior vision, forcing it to begin anew and setting the stage for the philosopher's quest to remember. Interestingly, even as each rebirth sinks the soul beneath forgetfulness and vice, a single spark remains to guide the way back. In the lands between, that spark is enshrined in the memory of grace. The memory of first grace, which once guided bygone tarnish to the lands between, lose all runes and return to the last side of grace visited. It is merely a cycle. Stand before the Elden Ring, become the Elden Lord. In these lines, the memory of grace reminds us that every journey through life and death is guided by a spark of higher purpose. Just as the philosopher's soul is drawn back toward the divine realm, the tarnish is pulled by that first glimmer of grace. But to truly advance, one must surrender worldly gains. This is what it means to lose all runes. To return to the last side of grace visited is to face one's past, by quite literally returning to where you came from. This isn't a defeat, but a renewal. Life is a cycle of losing and rediscovering truth. At its culmination, standing before the Elden Ring mirrors the philosopher's final ascent. Having shed illusion and embraced wisdom, you claim your place as Elden Lord, the ultimate guardian of order and understanding. The soul, only through the crucible of adversity, inquiry, of life, each trial, each spark of insight, can it rekindle that lost brilliance. Every encounter with a living soul restores luster to the blades of euphoria. just as each philosophical question restores a fragment of the soul's original wisdom. And so the cycle turns doubt into insight, darkness into light, death into rebirth, ever onward toward the full abundance of understanding. The heart of Euporia's power is the soul. Without it, there is no renewal. Against those who live in death, beings cut off from the light, their way blocked like a moon eclipsing the sun, the twin blade stays dark and wilted. Our beliefs are acts of faith, and the Inquisitors are the Tower's mind warriors, not warriors of steel, but masters of inquiry. With their barbed golden arcs and twin blade Euporia, they drive opponents into aporia, probing the foundations of our faith and forging deeper convictions through doubt. In their crucible of the mind, each sting of a barbed arc is a challenge to belief. Each strike of Euporia rekindles insight from the soul's own doubt. They know that understanding is born in conflict by challenging one's beliefs, awakening clarity only by confronting its shadow. All these trials feed into the Spira, the normalized crucible current. Beliefs tangled together are tested and questioned to form a column that stretches towards the gods, and through this, our convictions, our highest ideals and sacred causes grow stronger. Each philosophical and theological clash is another coil ascended, a testament that understanding is not given, but won through active engagement with contradiction. In that underground dwelling, they will not see as well as their fellows. There'll be many jokes about the man who went on a visit to the sun and lost his eyes. And if they find anybody trying to set free and enlighten one of their number, they will put him to death, if they can catch him. This passage captures the cruelty of ignorance turned hostile. Those still chained in the cave mock and jeer at anyone who dares speak of the outside world. They make many jokes at the freed prisoner's expense, calling him blinded by the sun. Worse, they see his attempt to free others as a threat, even plotting violence to keep everyone enslaved in darkness. In other words, people often ridicule and reject anyone who challenges their comfort zone of illusion, often choosing ignorance over enlightenment. What if you refuse to learn? What if you could escape doubt through other means? Where the Inquisitors drive their minds into aporia, doubt, to confront your ignorance in hopes of reaching an understanding, Euporia. One chose the opposite path, to embrace blissful ignorance rather than endure endless questioning. The Lamenter. Lamenting visage, a stone lantern carved to resemble a lamenting human head, the eyes vacantly beaming out light, can be raised up when equipped in the left hand, illuminating more of the surrounding area. The unusual expression somehow imparts a sense of contentment, a languid ease of one who needs not sight, and its unique skill the blindfold of happiness. Swing the head while covering the eyes, unleashing a wail of lamentation, while temporarily making the user of this skill harder to see. To those who seek happiness, blindness is bliss. The lamenting visage embodies a radical solution to doubt. Abandon insight and understanding and find happiness in never knowing. After all, ignorance is bliss. The blindfold of happiness weaponizes willful blindness as a form of self-erasure. When swung and covering your eyes, you become harder to see, almost invisible, because you are silently declaring, I refuse to acknowledge you, so you cease to exist for me, and in turn I cease to exist for you. It's a physical enactment of blissful ignorance. By hiding their vision, they hide their very presence, choosing to opt out of both outer and inner sight, covering their eyes to shut out the world's truths and still the mind's eye. In that deliberate unseen, they flee doubt by refusing to look, finding a dark refuge in self-imposed ignorance. Lamenter's Mask. A stone mask twisted into an expression of rapturous grief. Use while disrobed to transform into a lamenter. The chains cannot be undone except by death. Using this mask while already transformed causes the head to swell in size. This transformation tallies with the state of a denizen of paradise, but the people of the tower denied and hid it from the world. In their foolishness, they view true bliss with deep fear. Wearing the Lamenter's mask requires us to strip away every layer of armor, rank, and even identity, because donning this mask means surrendering every conviction, every belief we once held. You'll notice the Lamentus mask follows the same pattern as the Dragon Communion hearts, Rock Heart and Priestess Heart, and in each case, repeated use while already transformed grants a temporary surge. Rock Heart or Priestess Heart used again in dragon form intensifies draconic power, boosting your incantations as a sign of the Communion's fierce energies feeding back on themselves. The Lamentus mask, while reapplied in Lamenta form, likewise triggers a physical feedback. The head swells. This isn't mere horror, it is Lamenta's reaffirmation of their ecstatic transformation, their own version of the boost seen in Dragon Communion hearts. Just as the double-dosed hearts supercharge draconic incantations, the double-dosed mask supercharges their rapturous grief, ballooning the very seat of thought to demonstrate the all-consuming power of willful, blissful ignorance in their self-crafted paradise. The Lamenta laments, not a single loss, but the void left by rejecting every higher truth and divine purpose in the first place. They reject the inward vision that the Inquisitors prized, instead surrendering to rapturous grief born of a refusal to partake in the journey of understanding. They find themselves in Emporia, haunted by doubt, yet escape its torments not by seeking understanding, but by choosing ignorance, paradoxically discovering a bliss akin to that of a denizen of paradise. They do not seek to strengthen their convictions, what they believe in. Instead, they abandon belief itself, choosing to stand in empty freedom rather than cling to any purpose. The Lamenta isn't so much rejecting deities, rather the need for purpose in life in order to be happy in the first place. They abandon conviction and direction, choosing an empty yet paradoxically blissful state of unknowing over the struggle to find meaning. In the Tower's rigid Inquisition-driven faith, where they wrestle to find truth, understanding, and purpose, that choice is terrifying, which explains why they hit the Lamenta. Interestingly, while on the topic of the people of the Tower and their limb, we should look at a rather unassuming group that, upon closer inspection, further links the people of the Tower to Socratic ideals, the Manflies. Manfly ashes, afflicted hornsent, eventually metamorphose into a fly-like form. It was believed that the moment the transformation took place, they were relieved from their suffering. To suffer is to be challenged, and through the sickness spread by the Manflies, the hornsent are thrust into a living crucible. The disease ravages the body and mind, forcing its victims into a cocoon, a moment of self-reflection, of introspection, an inward folding of consciousness, and, like a shedding chrysalis, is reborn. Only then are they freed from pain, emerging in a fly-like form. To complete this transformation shows that true renewal demands being challenged and enduring the deepest trials. Emerging not merely reborn, but spiritually awakened. This transformation is not chosen, but imposed. Hornsent are thrust into an existential trial by the sickness of the Manflies. Stripped of agency, they face a torturous inward descent. The cocoon becomes a chamber of self-reflection, a forced confrontation with every buried fear, doubt, and complacency. Only when the poison siege ends and the new shell hardens are they released from their agony, emerging in a fly-like form. That this metamorphosis is compelled, rather than voluntary, speaks to the harsh truth that rebirth often arrives only through trials beyond one's control, by simply living. In surviving what was thrust upon them, the Hornsent proved that true spiritual awakening demands not just willingness, but the endurance of the deepest, most unwelcome challenges. Whether conjured by divine will, the fly's sickness functions as an uncompromising tool for compelled introspection, a divine punishment or a calculated moral test. For if you kill me, you will not easily discover another of my sort, who, even if it is rather ridiculous to say, has simply been set upon the city by the god, as though upon a great and well-born horse, who is rather sluggish because of his great size and needs to be awakened by some gadfly. Just so in fact, the god seems to me to have set me upon the city as someone of this sort. Socrates' comparison to a gadfly is illuminating. Just as the gadfly's sting rouses the slow-moving horse, that being Athens itself, so too do the Manflies force chains upon the complacent in the Hornsent society. Far more than a test of the individual, it is a test of the community as a whole. Ailment Talisman, a talisman depicting a soul taken by sickness. When certain ailments are triggered, this talisman grants resistance to the same ailment. When the weak were infected, with the dreaded fly sickness, they perished well before the metamorphosis could take hold. Oddly, those who cared for the infected and made certain they were given proper burial were never afflicted themselves. By tending to the sick and ensuring dignified burials, caretakers demonstrate the communal bonds that hold the land together. And in doing so, they gain true immunity. Conversely, to fall victim to the sickness is not merely a matter of physical weakness, but of moral failure. They have grown complacent, spiritually stagnant, and neglected their duty to others. Those who succumb did not simply lack strength, they failed to uphold the rituals of care that define and protect the community. In effect, the sickness draws a clear line. Compassion and duty knit the social fabric and ward off spiritual stagnation, while neglect unravels it. Thus, the man-fly trial insists that salvation is not an individual achievement, but the product of shared empathy and ritual obligation, reminding every hauntant that their well-being is bound to the welfare of their neighbors. The man-fly sickness and the community's care enact the same growth through being challenge. Suffering demands compassion, and compassion in turn mitigates suffering, creating a space where true insight can emerge. Their poison targets spiritual stagnation, striking those who have grown complacent in the crucible they claim sacred. Because, as we know, the hauntant view the crucible as sacred for the refinement walked through its evolutionary gifts. By afflicting the hauntant, it forces them into their own ritual of refinement. The sickness is a brutal trial. Each afflicted soul must endure suffering and hardship. Only when the new carapace hardens and the agony subsides do they emerge, living proof that true evolution demands both inward reckoning and endurance. In this way, the man-fly sting is more than a disease. It is the hauntant's gadfly, a sacred catalyst compelling every soul to wrestle with complacency and achieve transformation. Then now comes the question, how shall we create our rulers? What way is there from darkness to light? The change is affected by philosophy, is it not? Here, the very survival of the city hinges on training leaders, philosopher kings, capable of discerning truth. Philosophy, for Plato, is not a luxury, but the indispensable method by which the soul moves from ignorance to knowledge, from darkness to light, and the city follows suit. But how do these philosopher kings come to know what is true? Not by passive reception, but by enduring contradiction. Just as the Inquisitors engage others in sharp dialectic, while questioning that tears away false certainty, so too must the philosopher kings wrestle with opposing appearances and conflicting values to reach clarity. Plato illustrates their struggle in his argument from opposites, which shows that knowledge arises when the mind confronts the tension between seeming opposites and discerns a deeper unity beneath them. Now, the stimulating class are the things which suggest contrast and relation. For example, suppose that I hold up to the eyes 3 fingers, a forefinger, a middle finger, a little finger. The sight equally recognizes all 3 fingers, but without number cannot distinguish them. Or again, suppose 2 objects to be relatively great and small. These ideas of greatness and smallness are supplied not by the senses, but by the mind. In this passage, Plato illustrates how our senses and our intellect perform distinct but complementary roles. The eyes may perceive 3 raised fingers, or notice that one object appears larger than another, but only the mind can discern 1, 2, and 3, or grasp the concepts of greatness and smallness. Sensory experience supplies raw data, multiplicity, magnitude, and contrast, while reason steps into the arena, fighting through these opposites to impose structure, number, and relational understanding. By holding up 3 fingers or comparing objects of different sizes, Plato shows that true knowledge isn't passive sight, but a conquest of the mind over mere appearance, transforming raw impression into universal intelligible truths. And so, just as Plato shows that true knowledge arises when the mind wrestles with the opposites, Elden Ring places its most sacred burden, the vision of order, on the Empyreans, who must do the same. If we take seriously the Platonic notion that rulers must ascend from ignorance to truth through dialectic, then the Empyreans are not chosen because they are flawless, but because they are capable of enduring contradiction. The Empyrean is not merely a vessel for divine rule, They are a battleground where conflicting visions must be reconciled. Like Plato's philosopher kings, they are trained not through ease, but through exposure to opposites and contradictions. This is where materia becomes essential. Her form, a spiraling tower of fingers, embodies the path of philosophical ascent, the slow, recursive climb through opposing visions, contradictions, toward clarity. It is a pattern of opposition folding into insight. Each twist carries its opposite, life and death, will and fate, light and dark, into closer proximity, forcing the soul to reckon with both. Our own hands are the first instruments of understanding, the very tools we use to count, measure, and distinguish. This is why materia's spiraling tower of fingers feels so profound. It literalizes what philosophy and mathematics have always taught us. Each twist of a spiral brings opposites, life, death, dark, light, the finite, and the infinite, into intimate tension. As you trace the spiral upwards, you are practicing the same act as counting on your fingers, breaking the world into parts, comparing them, and then finding a relation that reveals deeper patterns. And at the tip of materia's spiraling fingers sits a microcosm, an entire cosmos held in miniature, reminding us that every grand truth, every law of nature or number begins with the simple distinction of one from many, small from great. In that gesture, Elden shows us that the cosmos and our own souls are grasped not by force, but the gentle art of distinction and the quiet labor of recursive insight. Just as materia's spiraling fingers hold a microcosm at her fingertips, so too do the two fingers grasp the seed of the Erdtree, the world tree, that stands for the order of all things. The Crimson Seed talisman is patterned after the Erdtree seed and even depicts the two fingers holding it aloft. Crimson Seed talisman, a crimson-colored talisman patterned after an Erdtree seed, greatly boosts HP restoration from flasks of crimson tears. The Erdtree seed of this talisman was presumed to be an object of myth. This age-old artifact also depicts the two fingers, perhaps harking back to the birth of the Erdtree. This isn't just a decoration, but a direct parallel to materia's macrocosm, a reminder that true understanding of the cosmos begins in our hands, in our ability to distinguish, count, and relate. The Erdtree itself, its roots in the earth, its branches into the heavens. It reminds us that our highest understanding of the world, its laws, patterns, and harmony springs from that same foundational act of scrutiny and care. Grasp a single seed and you begin to know the tree. Empyreans, chosen by the two fingers, participate in the same recursive movement of the mind. The struggle through opposition toward comprehension and the shaping of inner conflict into universal order. Proposition, opposition, and resolution. Their worth lies in their capacity to endure contradiction without collapsing, to hold opposing visions within themselves and forge from that tension a coherent vision of the world. And the reward for this inward labor is vision, not vision in the literal sense, but in a philosophical one. The ability to perceive opposing visions of order and through that tension uncover a deeper, unifying truth. This is why the Empyreans are candidates for godhood, not because they possess power, but because they have struggled with this unity and emerged with understanding. In this way, the Empyrean mirrors Plato's philosopher king, where the philosopher king must turn their soul toward the light of the good by means of reasoned inquiry. The Empyrean must turn inward toward the conflicting natures that define them, and find within that turmoil a higher, unifying principle. This is no easy journey. It demands more than obedience or strength. It demands the will to reflect and endure what remains. The Inquisitors, then, are not mere enforcers of doctrine. They are the microcosm of the Empyreans themselves. Just as the divine warriors are miniature Elden lords, strong in body and will, the Inquisitors are the spiritual shadows of the Empyreans, confronting contradiction symbolized by their spearer, administering trials and tearing at illusion, not to destroy faith, but to refine it and come to a better understanding. Their barbed questioning, their refusal to allow comfort, these are the tools of dialectic made flesh. If the Empyrean must bear the burden of uniting opposites on a divine scale, the Inquisitors play out the same struggle within the soul of another. In the end, every figure we followed, warrior, Elden Lord, Inquisitor, Empyrean, faces a crucible of becoming, whether through the clash of steel or barbed questions, whether on the battlefield or the recesses of the mind. They rise only by wrestling with contradiction. and so must we. For to live well is to not shun adversity, but to face it willingly, even gratefully, to spiral through doubt, pain, and conflict until we emerge not unbroken, but remade. This is the message buried in the tangled horns, the barbed arcs, and the spiraling columns of the tower, that struggle is sacred, and becoming is the holiest act of all. How fitting that hardship and suffering themselves are part of the same cosmic cycle of opposites. Without struggle, there is no triumph. Without dark, no light. Yet when we anchor ourselves in a purpose, something worth our sweat, our tears, our very lives, we transform that cycle into a spiral of ascent. By believing in a cause greater than ourselves and daring to fight for it, we give shape and direction to every trial we endure. In a world where even gods are sculpted by the tempest they survive, let us not turn on life's wheel like leaves in the wind. Instead, let us spiral upward with intention, toward illumination, toward wisdom, toward the fullest realization of what we might become. Every setback becomes a kindling for our resolve, every moment of doubt a chance to recommit. We must fight for what we believe in, not because the battle will be easy, but because its very difficulty tempers our souls,